Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jeremiah Lorrig, and I serve as Deputy Director of HSLDA's Generation Joshua. And joining me today is Sam, or maybe better known as SD Smith, the author of the Green Ember Series, a homeschool dad, and a speaker. Actually, he was speaking at a homeschool conference that I was at just a little bit ago, earlier this year. Anyway, we will get to know Sam more and get to hear a little bit of his story about how to foster creativity in homeschooling. But first, I want to quickly invite everybody joining us to let us know how long you've been homeschooling. And if you're familiar with any of Sam's books, let us know in the comments or in the chat. And let us know which books you've read, which ones you're most excited about. Anyway, also put any questions you have in the chat for either Sam or I, and we'll save some time at the end to go over those. But I would like to mention that we're talking about a great adventure series, and there's some moments in the series that are going to be spoiled if you talk about who died in this epic scene or anything like that. So please avoid putting spoilers in the chat. That would be a really great way to make sure that this conversation is good for people who don't know what's going to happen next. Anyway, thanks again for taking some time, Sam, to talk with us today. Will you share a little bit about yourself and how you got started in this path?
Sure. Whoa. Coughing right off the start there.
Put you on the spot right there.
Whew. Cheers, everyone. Here's some water. Wow. I'd like to try to start all interviews very smoothly, very, very coolly, by immediately choking to death right upon the beginning. I was fine right up until the time I needed to talk. I was not choking, but then the moment came and I literally choked. As an athlete, this is very tough for me. You try to go through a lot of games without choking, but I did not succeed. Other than just being a choker, my name is Sam, and I live in Southern West Virginia. I'm married to a beautiful woman named Gina, and we have 4 kids. They are pretty great. They range in age from 10 to 19. So I'm sorry, I got a weird feedback there. Is it better now?
Yeah. Are you hearing a mess?
I'm hearing just like a reverberating echo. Sometimes.
Oh no! All right. Well, is it better now?
Yes, seems to have stopped now.
Good.
I knew I didn't trust that sound guy, the tech guy. He had a shifty. I didn't see him, but I imagine he had a sort of a shifty look.
Is he going to be a villain in your next book?
Yeah, I think so.
I like that. Just use the difficulty.
So yeah, I have 4 kids. They range from 10 to 19. Two girls, 2 boys. We've been homeschooling. You asked earlier how long you've been homeschooling, and we've been homeschooling, I guess, since our oldest Anne was, like 4 or 5, I guess. So probably almost 15 years or so. And we've loved it. It's been awesome. My job is I'm a writer. I'm a storyteller. I've written a series called the Green Ember Series, which started out as stories that I told my oldest 2 kids at the time, Josiah and Anne. Anne was a toddler when those stories started on our porch, and they became sort of like this, go-to serial story that I told them over the years. And eventually they asked me to write those down, and that became sort of our little family story. And I did write it down. I thought it was really kind of cool because I felt like it was a win before we, ever sold a copy of it. I was like, this is great. This is awesome. We've got this little relic, this little memorial to our time together. It was really special. And I thought it's a special story for us. So here it is. You can put it on your shelf and read it to your kids. And that was like awesome win. And so this is just bonus territory with that other people are enjoying it, and super bonus territory that kind of a lot of people seem to enjoy it, which is kind of cool because it feels like, hey, there's a lot of other families like ours that just enjoy this sort of thing. And so I love that. I love that I get to wake up every day and think about stories and think about sharing and feeling a real clear connection to the audience, like that. I don't have to pretend, I don't know, I've had different jobs where, well, like I was a toilet cleaner for once. I used to go to restaurants and gas stations and stuff like that and clean their bathrooms, which it doesn't take much imagination. You don't have to be a creative type to imagine what kind of situations those were for me. But all work is honorable work is what my dad taught me. And I believe that, and it was good work and it was good for me. And I've had a lot of different jobs, but showing up at the 7-Eleven bathroom, to clean up whatever happened there. It was not, I wasn't going in there with the massive enthusiasm all the time. But having a job where I get to show up every day and love and serve families and kids and give them a gift is awesome. I love it. I feel really grateful to the Lord for given me that job. And I don't feel like maybe we can get into this, but I don't feel like it's a real, like, sort of elite. I don't think it's that different than the toilet cleaner in a lot of ways. Like I feel like both are really valuable. I think of myself sort of as it's a job with an apron is kind of how I think about it. I feel like a line cook or someone who's serving, someone who's giving people something. And I think that there's something special about stories, and I'll hold on to that truth. But at the same time, I'm a servant, and I'm someone who I want to give a gift. And so I think about it in kind of modest terms as well. Try to hold on to that really, really tightly as well, as just sort of an ordinary Christian vocation rooted in love and service. And so, I feel a lot of gratitude for that I get to do this one, because I really like this one a lot. And I don't have to fake enthusiasm. I don't have to fake affection for the audience, because it started out as the audience was my kids. And then it sort of just extended to a bunch of other kids and other families. And it just feels like really natural. And I don't have to, it's not a very calculating job. Like, I've got to think about this. Like, I've got to figure out how to it's really from an overflow of love. It feels very honest, like very honest work. And I love it.
Awesome. As a homeschool dad, like, I'm trying to picture the very first story with rabbits. And I don't know if you remember that first story, but could you kind of set the scene? Was this a bedtime story? What happened that first moment when you were like, oh no, I've got to tell a story, and it's going to be rabbits today?
Yeah, well, a lot of people who are familiar with my work have probably heard me tell this story several times, but if you haven't, it happened just like right over there on our front porch. And my daughter was just a little toddler, and I used to tell her a lot of stories. I was kind of my oldest brother told me stories when I was little, and I sort of told my baby sister stories when I was a kid. And there was stories about the neighborhood horse. We lived out in the country, but there was a horse called Sparky. My brother told me Sparky stories, and we had a dog, and we tell stories about the dog. So I sort of did that kind of thing with my daughter. I told her a story about a dog named Chance, and we had this sort of series of these stories about Chance, and he would sort of help these other little animals. And there was that, and then there was stories about the girl with golden wings, about a girl kind of like her who sort of grew golden wings and flew out the window and sort of went on this big adventure. So I would tell her these different stories at times. It was kind of natural. And so we were on the porch one day. It was a beautiful day, and we were there. There was a front porch swing, and we went over to kind of the steps leading up to the porch. And it's out in the country. It's in West Virginia, real rural setting. And there were, I was going to just tell her, it was kind of story time. And she loved stories, and I loved telling them to her. And there were, since we live out in the country, there were like wild rabbits, kind of hopping around in the yard. And so we were looking at the rabbits, and I just started telling her a story about an older sister rabbit with a younger brother rabbit, because she had a baby brother. And that's how it started that day. And the stories were pretty simple to begin with, like very sort of like almost moralistic, kind of like, just a lot of clarity, a lot of black and white, which is little kids, tend to enjoy a little more. And then I kept telling her, she really loved the story. So I told her another one, told her the next one, what happened with them next. And her little brother kind of joined us at some point, and this became sort of our serial. We called it The Rabbits at Jupiter's Crossing. That's what we would, that was the original name of it, The Rabbit. And actually, if you look in my file in my computer, all my Green Ember books and stories are under the file, The Rabbits at Jupiter's Crossing. And
I was looking at the map, that's in the book. So, and if anybody is interested in winning these books, we actually are putting a contest in the comments where you can go ahead and enter for a chance to win an autographed copy of this series. So we're going to be mailing that out to somebody. So go ahead and put your name in the comments, or put my name in the comments. I would like to win
or my
well.
name. I would love to win it too. Sounds good.
Outstanding. But I saw that there's Jupiter's Crossing on the map. So you started telling these stories, and it begins to fill out this world. It sounds like it starts in one small space and then moves out from there. But I guess I was talking to one of my best friends down. He's short. He's only 11, and I asked him. So I'm interviewing SD Smith. What should I ask him? And he said, "Why rabbits with swords? Why rabbits with swords? It's so cool, but why? Why did that happen?" So I'm curious. You start with Jupiter's Crossing, and you develop into this world where it's this robust society with rabbits and swords and kings and princes and all these things. Why rabbits with swords?
Well, I think the better question is why not? I mean, it's why wouldn't you? I mean, swords make everything better, I think. And there's a kind of, I don't know. I think the biggest probably influence was probably Robin Hood. I loved Robin Hood as a kid a whole lot, and I enjoyed those stories a whole lot. The Errol Flynn movie and the Disney movie, I loved Robin Hood so much. And I read Roger Lancelot Green's book and several different versions of the story. And that would probably really stuck in my imagination, I think, when I was telling these stories. So I love the medieval setting. It's easy to understand for people too. People get it. You don't have to do a lot of work. And I know there's writers are rightly should be sort of wary of cliches. And I get that. And I'm for that mostly, but also there's a little bit of like, it helps to, there's some, if you kind of understand a situation, if you see a kid going over to his friend's house and there's like an adult male and adult female, like it's a cliche, that's his parents, like, but it sort of helps because you don't have to then say, and then this tall person with long hair who was wearing a dress was his mother. And mothers you don't have to explain it all. And the father did this. I mean, maybe nowadays maybe do need to explain it, but that it's sort of like cliches help. Like they're good. They're kind of, and maybe cliche is the wrong word, but some things that part of the craft of writing stories is sort of like, it's a magic trick a little bit. It's like, look over here, don't look over here. Look at my right hand, don't look at what's in my left hand. Have your attention over here. And so it's basically like, what do you want your audience to work on? Like, what do you want them to think about and use their energy on? And so if you have like, you got a bunch of rabbits and you got a medieval setting, like that's, everybody kind of understands that. And then you don't have to work at it. You like understand about kings and princes and knights and heroic sorts. They kind of get it. And then you can kind of work from there. And so I think that's a default that I like a lot. And I didn't think too much about, whether the rabbits had hands and stuff. These are more human-like rabbits. It's really a human story. And that's really what I want you to focus on. So I don't want you to think too much about like, oh my goodness, there's some people that are like, rabbits don't have hands. And I'm like, okay, buddy, I get that. They also don't talk, and they don't have souls or whatever, like that these characters do. And they're really stand-ins for people. So that's what I want to do.
And you can kind of bring people when you're telling us, when you're using some things that are familiar to people, you can kind of bring them in to the world that you're trying to tell by starting them in a place that's familiar already to their experience or to their imagination.
Totally. And I wanted people to focus on the internal stakes, the internal struggle, and the event stuff too. But I wanted really the moral sort of struggle of the rabbits. I wanted that to be the focus. And I didn't, it's not the mechanics for me. It's not like hard sci-fi or something where I'm like trying to explain the science really carefully. It's people, it's human stories. It's the sort of moral imagination and that kind of thing. That's the focus that I want. I want people to think about those internal struggles and sort of the stakes, the epic stakes. So that's just, it's just a tool, and I like it. It worked out good because it was accidental, but I like it because rabbits are so vulnerable. And so that works really good. It's the same reason why children's stories work with children whose maybe parents are either gone or, we don't know, they're on their own, they're vulnerable. That's what the Chronicles of Narnia is. The Pevensey kids are alone. they're distant, and it's the same with really the Lord of the Rings is similar. The kids are just hobbits. They're not actually kids. They're older, but they're small and they're vulnerable. And that's, we like stories like that. Those are good. So rabbits actually work. I mean, I didn't calculate this, but they're very vulnerable, and the birds of prey and wolves have become kind of a natural, again, all that stuff you sort of don't have to explain. It's kind of like it's right there. And I like that because it sort of gets that underdog, that vulnerable kind of a thing. You immediately sympathize with them.
You were talking about story mechanics. The mechanic for the giveaway is that you need to go to the comments and fill out the form. We put a link with the form there. So if you are wanting to enter into the drawing for the autographed books, go to the comments, click on the link that will open the form where you can enter there, because I'm seeing a lot of excitement. The people are loving what you're saying about an adventure story and how this can connect with, I think, their kids or us. Even, I read the first book not too long ago, and I felt like there was the story and the setting that was there, and then there's kind of those deeper themes that were pulling me in even more intensely than the plot. So when you're writing a story like this, what were some of those big themes that you wanted kids to be able to take away when they read this adventure story?
Yeah, I think you're describing exactly what happens with readers, and that is that really, and it's a lot of like adult kid kind of a thing. There's sort of the surface level of this adventure, which is really what I focus on as a storyteller. I don't focus deeply on what lesson do I want to teach or what value do I want to. That stuff bubbles up, and it's there because I'm a Christian, because whatever the things I value in life, those sort of deeper themes, they sort of bubble up. But I sort of try to stay focused on what and try to just tell a really good story that's believable, that's honest, that's not trying to trick somebody into thinking something else. They're not really like cleverly disguised moral lessons, but they are replete. I think much like the Lord of the Rings, obviously not to that level of success for sure, because I think he's just the master, but just really good, faithful stories, feigned history. Tolkien talked about his sort of suspicion of allegory, and there's some good allegory for sure. But I sort of sympathize with his perspective on the fact that he didn't love allegory because he felt like it resided in the sort of the purposeful domination of the reader by the author. And that he said people mistake allegory for application, and he talked about application resides sort of in the freedom of the reader. And I sort of take that as well. I'm not. I think there's so much. I mean, I probably haven't read. I don't think I've read very many Christian books outside of the Bible, of course, that have influenced me more to love what is good and true and beautiful than the Lord of the Rings. But he's not teaching in that. He's telling a great story, but it's so. It's so thoroughly good. It's so thoroughly beautiful. It's so true that it makes me love what I ought to love and it's so influential for me spiritually. And that's sort of my approach, is that, but you're exactly right. What happens is these people, kids really enjoy it on like, oh my goodness, what's happened next? And the parents, I think, enjoy that too, but the parents are seeing this sort of like river of meaning kind of beneath all of that. And this sort of like the echoes are, that the bells are going off in their head, and it's sort of like resonating with them, this longing for the mending, which again, I didn't intentionally sort of, but you have like the story mechanics, you have a problem, and then you have to like, the whole sort of contract with the reader is like, that problem's going to be solved or resolved in some way. So Christianity is a story, and it jives so well, and plus because it's such a comprehensive worldview that it makes sense of reality in a way that no other worldviews do. So it's very broad. You can tell, when you look at the Bible, you can just tell so many different kinds of stories faithfully. But those stories that tell about a coming resolution, in my stories, it's the mending, that these people are working for a mending, and that affects how they live now. They're looking at the mending that's coming, and they're acting in accordance with that, even if it costs them their lives. And that was not a simple, like, I'm going to teach them about longing for the kingdom of God. It was not like that. That was just in me, and it bubbled out, and it makes sense in the story, and it's honest. It's not. And so there's sometimes you'll be like, well, that's not exactly like this, or that's not a one-to-one comparison, and it's not. But you will feel, as you read the Green Ember series, you will feel that sort of wave of reality with a capital R flowing through it, I think. And that's what happens why parents are reading the book to their kids, and the kids are leaping for joy because of the climax, and the parents are weeping for joy because of this longing that's in them. We've had reports of that. I've been told that 1,000 times. And so you're exactly right. It works on those two levels pretty well. And again, that wasn't intentional. I was just trying to tell a good story, but I think that stuff just has come through so strongly. Because it's just
one of the things I tell I teach Generation Joshua students, and I try to teach what it means to be a good citizen. What does it mean to take that responsibility seriously? And I tell them there is knowledge that can be gained from textbooks. There's knowledge that can be gained from Google, but wisdom comes through stories. And we see this throughout history, whether it's C.S. Lewis telling his stories, or you mentioned Tolkien several times, even going back to the first century when Jesus is teaching. How does he teach? He teaches through stories. And these stories echo down through time, and they're not a simple formula to X, Y equals Z. What it does is it teaches us, and it gives us an example of how we can apply these universal principles in specific situations that actually make a difference. So as I'm thinking about your books, one of the things that really struck me was this concept of these people who are already living in a world that doesn't yet exist. Mm-hmm. And it's that they're longing for this place to come, and they're living like it does exist, because it's kind of this already but not yet. This thing is out there waiting to be grasped. Mm-hmm. But we as people, or they as rabbits, need to figure out how to live rightly in their context, mm-hmm. even if the world is still broken. Mm-hmm. So what does that, when you're telling a story like that, how are you looking at the world that's around you and seeing the reflection in the world with the rabbits?
Yeah, that's really true. That's exactly what's going on in the story, for sure. And that's definitely what's going on with me in my life, and us in our lives, where we are in the story. We're in the middle part of the story. And when middle parts are sometimes really bad, like sometimes really tough, like there's a lot of conflict. The resolution isn't quite here yet, but we know about it, and we know the story, and we know what's true. And so we're living in light of that. And it's really true, what you were saying about stories, the power of stories. I know a lot of people talk about this now, and it's kind of, more popular to sort of discuss this now. But I think for people who are concerned about truth, like there's a lot of artists or creative sort of types, musicians, that kind of thing, who are really down on sort of theology or down on the Bible, or really concerned that basically they can only say things that are really critical about Christianity or anything. And I think that's kind of a bummer. It's a pretty big bummer, because the power of the truth is so, Chesterton talked about it. It's a fence, but it's a fence around a playground. He described orthodoxy in that way. And that's how I feel. Come on over to the truth. The truth is beautiful. There's no kind of adventure quite like orthodoxy, quite like reality. And so getting harmonized with that. And I think on the other side, there are a lot of Christians who are some suspicious of stories, and because stories are dangerous, and that's absolutely, so it's I want to validate that they are, it's true. But with the best stories, with stories that are faithful, you don't subtract truth, you add meaning, because you can't actually have meaning without stories. So you could say, I love you. What does love mean? We don't know what love is. We don't know what power is. We don't know what strength is. We talk about who God is, who Jesus is. We don't know who he is apart from stories, apart from what he's done. I'm the God who brought you out of Egypt. We know about that God because of what he did. I am the crucified and risen Christ. That is a story, true story, happened. It's a story that all the truth, all the commands, everything, which are valid and important, we got to hold on to these teachings. They all come from that story, and we actually don't know what it means when you say love your neighbor. We What does it mean? We see it because we see Jesus, because we meet Jesus and we see him do it. And we see power because he calms the sea. So we know what that means. We know what those things mean because of stories, the parting of the Red Sea, creation, all these things. You can say like God is good. What does that mean? I don't know. These words are meaningless until you connect it to a story. So even our best doctrine, which I'm a big fan of, it's important. The truth, the capital T, it's shorthand for a story, and so it's got to go together. Beauty and truth will live together or die apart is something that Brian Brown said, and I think that's so true. And that goes to these characters. I think for me, the thing I always think of is that I think of my dad, I was a missionary kid in South Africa. I went there. I was 12 years old when we went there. My dad we were a missionary family. I turned 13 the day Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and when I left the country, that was my first birthday there. And when I left there, he was the president. So apartheid was in full force when we were there. So I got to live. I lived in a white area, a European area, translation white. I went to a white school. And at that time, my dad, along with the Zulu pastor, started a Zulu church in the nearby Zulu township. When we left that town, we had Zulu neighbors. It was really wild, but it was an awesome time to be there. Crazy, nuts. But there was this common practice, and it's a bummer because a lot of the white South Africans were great and are great. This was a bad common practice, which was that a black man of any tribe, Zulus are just the biggest tribe there, but in our area, it was almost all Zulu, but you could have a 65-year-old Zulu man with a white beard and a 10-year-old white boy, literal boy, would refer to him as boy. Hey boy, come over here. And we did that in the United States as well, that kind of dehumanizing sort of language. And the native black African dude would say to the guy, boss. Oh, it was always boss. They would say boss to me. Hey boss. Oh boss. Yes, boss. That kind of a thing. And it was this sort of like just this like, okay, that's normal. Everybody does it. That's totally normal. Well, my dad did, and my dad's not some kind of radical or something. He's just he's an ordinary pastor from rural West Virginia. But what he did was every time he came in contact with any Zulu man, he would call them boss. And he sort of reversed it. And he would never say boy or anything like that. He would say, okay, boss. Okay, boss. And it's just this like little thing. It's a really little thing. But what I interpreted that as a kid, I thought it was awesome. And I was like, oh, my dad's really cool. He's just like, I love that. Like my heart went out to it. It was like a cool story. And it was this cool reality. But later in reflecting in life, what I'm realizing is my dad was living, that's the kingdom. The kingdom of God is where every tribe and tongue, we don't have this sort of like disrespectful sort of ways of interacting with each other that are like, that's based on sort of like your ethnicity or your tribe, your color, or whatever, that kind of stuff. That's out of step with the kingdom of God. And I think Dad was living in step with the kingdom of God in that sense, but he was doing it out of time in a way. And I think when we are faithful to the Bible, to Jesus' commands about, whether that's sexuality or about the value of human life or racism or anything, like if we are living in step with the values of the kingdom of God, it doesn't matter what's going on around us, as much. And we have to sort of be bold and live and be people who are living out of time, living in anticipation with radical love, but radical fidelity to Christ.
And he was living restoration,
yeah,
even in a world that wasn't yet restored.
Right.
And I like that. And another thing that I was reflecting on in your book, and like I said, if you are interested in winning this book, please go onto into the comments and find the link where you can sign up to enter the drawing. But one of the things I loved reading your book was I asked my students a couple weeks ago, I asked them, what is freedom? And we discussed it for a little bit, and we pulled up a dictionary definition, and it said the state of being free, which is not helpful.
What does that mean?
It does not help us understand what freedom means. But as I was reading about Pickett running through a field, I had this sense of what freedom can be. And it can be a person chasing after the thing that makes their heart soar. And that story gives meaning to the concept of freedom that is something that is difficult to understand. So one of the things that you in your story, you've kind of lived this reality of being a homeschool dad, and kind of learning what it means to have a freedom in teaching your children. What how long have you been homeschooling, and what kind of led you down that path?
We've been homeschooling for about 15 years, I think. I think that's right. And I mean, my wife, we're sort of traditional family in a lot of ways. My wife is spearhead of that part of our calling. But I mean, I guess I'm pretty involved in a lot of ways. Maybe not. Yeah, we're pretty close family, and I tend to sort of look at life as an opportunity to kind of learn and grow. So we got a lot of conversations going on, whether that's the Premier League or history or the Bible or whatever. We talk a lot. I don't think I'm a distant dad, but my wife's the real hero in the homeschooling story. But we love it. We enjoy it. I mean, and we don't think it's the only way to operate. We do love we have the freedom to do it. I think that would be a bummer, to say the least, that if we were limited to just kind of maybe one option for education. So I like the choice stuff. I like it when people are free to make different choices. And for some families, different families are going to look different. We like homeschooling a lot. We've enjoyed it. I like the flexibility. I like the opportunity for kids to kind of grow and outside of some of the unnecessary maybe boundaries, and still have sort of a robust. But I think it's like, when you say like, I'm not a homeschool absolutist, because like there's a lot of parents who are like, you can only give what you've got, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that many of us are maybe more qualified for that than we think. But it just, for us, it harmonizes with sort of the overall view of discipleship, and like raising them and bringing them, like helping them walk along the path that the Lord
And how
has for us.
yeah, how have you been able to use your freedom in your homeschooling environment to foster creativity as a creative person yourself, to foster creativity in your children?
Well, I mean, our family's probably a little weird in that way because of my job, that it's kind of in the water for us. Like my dad was very creative. My mom was creative. Maybe my dad particularly, like he would draw, and he was a preacher, and he was a good writer, and he wrote poetry and that kind of thing. My papa was a painter. My dad painted too. And but they were also like very they sound like really kind of like weird dudes, but they were also like they're both veterans, combat veterans, very masculine men. My dad worked at a nickel plant. My papa could like work on cars and stuff. They were men. They were manly men, but they were sort of had permission to love beautiful things as well, without sort of losing any of that. So I grew up in that kind of environment. I think my kids are growing up in a similar environment where it's kind of normal to engage in those what we call creative endeavors, like the arts and things. And the freedom has been awesome, because like the fruit of it, I mean, is that the kids are really well. I mean, I wrote a book with my oldest son, and last year, and he was 16 years old, when the book came out, and he's 17 now, and we're working on the second book. And that's something that probably would be very difficult to do, as an example, if we had some other constraints. I think homeschool has allowed him to really flex some of those, to test some of those vocations. He really loves music, and he loves filmmaking and storytelling, and so now he's getting into being a novel.
Could you delve into that a little bit more? What is it like to have a creative project with your son and produce a book? And are you referring to the book Jack Zulu? Is that the book you're talking about? Tell us about the inception of this Jack Zulu book.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one that's kind of natural in a way. Like the Green Ember was really organic, and there are 10 Green Ember books, 4 main books, and then 2 sort of side trilogies. And Jack Zulu and the Waylander's Key is my newest book, and it came out with my son. And it sort of started out as a as a show, like he's very sort of cinematic in his thinking. So he was writing a treatment for a TV show, and it was really good. I was enjoying it a lot. He was doing a great job with it, and he was sort of developing it. He's kind of a hard worker. He works really hard at this stuff, and so at one point I was having a conversation with him about the sort of my own experience with sort of movie studios or movie makers, people who are interested in working on a Green Ember film or TV show. And I was just saying, it's like a different conversation when you have something that's sort of established, that you have like an already an audience, that sort of thing. And I was just telling him, like, that's different than me going to a studio and saying, hey, I've got an idea for a rabbits with swords story. Like, that's different than saying, like, hey, we've sold 1 million of these things, and there's a lot of people out there that love them, and that kind of thing is a different conversation. So I was saying, like, I know how to do books. If you want to do a book, like, I can help you with that. Or if you want to do it together, we can sort of co-write it, whatever. Or I can write a novel adaptation. And he was excited about them ever since. And there's a lot of ins and outs about it, but it started with his idea. And I think I've sort of brought the Zulu element to it, but it's really a small town West Virginia story, which he's very familiar with. And I think he's been mostly responsible for the world building and the characters and that kind of thing. And we've kind of come together to execute on that. But it's been awesome. It's been a wonderful experience. I'd like to say, because I was concerned about it to begin with, that it was we have kind of a good relationship. And I was like, oh, is this going to be the thing that kind of, the father and son, the teenage son, and we're going to butt heads. And it really hasn't been an occasion for that. We've had a really sweet time together. It's not been always easy because it's like work, but we've been working together and like pushing the same direction. And it's been an awesome collaboration. He's a great partner. He's got a lot more humility than I had at that age, because he's got a lot more of the philosophy of like sort of the best idea wins, and that we need to collaborate. And so there's like, I think at that age, I think I was more of like, don't tell me my idea is bad. Or he's kind of almost, maybe it's because he's grown up in this sort of like place where I'm a lot different writer on my 11th book than I was on my first book. A lot less fragile, a lot more like, okay, what's good? Like, let's make it the best we can. You're saying this part doesn't work. That doesn't hurt my feelings. Like, we're all working for the audience. We're all working for I've kind of matured a little bit in that way. And he's almost like already kind of there. So it's been a wonderful experience. And I'm excited about, we're working on the second book. I was writing some more this morning, and we're collaborating on that. And it's been a wonderful time.
That's super exciting. So a parent, we've got a lot of parents who are tuned in right now. What would be some advice that you would give a parent who wants to foster creativity or maybe encourage their kid to actually sit down and write their first book? What advice would you give to a parent in that situation?
Man, we could talk about this for a really long time. Trying to think of like what's really helpful in a small bites. I mean, I have a course about this called The Green Writer, which I think is good. It's a pretty good course for sort of beginning writers. It's good. It can be used for parents and kids together, or a kid.
And how can people get involved in that?
It's easy to find. You just go to my website, sdsmith.com. You can find, or search The Green Writer. I think the actual website is greenwriter.sdsmith.com. But if you look up Green Writer SD Smith, and there's 3 free lessons on there you can just kind of look at. Or actually, I'll tell you what the easiest way to do it is sdsmith.com/writers. I think that we've got 2 links there. One's to the Young Writers Workshop, and one's to the Green Writer, my own course. And the Young Writer Workshop is awesome. It's so good. Actually, they're open right now for enrollment. That's something I really recommend. But go to sdsmith.com/writers. You can find some early lessons from me. But as a parent, yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, it's sort of like the stuff we're talking about. You got to value it yourself. Like, you've got to sort of, if you're coming from sort of a camp of being like really afraid of stories, like I would just say, like, go into that. Recognize that the Bible is full of stories, full of genre. The Bible's it's like a lot of songs. Like, if you don't understand poetry or songs, literature, that kind of thing, you are not going to understand the Bible. And it's because it is just packed full of it. Even when you get to the Gospels, you think, oh, that's in the prophets or in the Psalms or in the wisdom literature. Good grief. Read the Christmas story. It's just songs everywhere. The Magnificat, and there's just songs everywhere. And so if you don't really think about the power of music or the power of the arts, like, you're really not going to approach the Bible with very much success. of actual understanding, of actually getting under the text and letting it speak to you. You might insert a very didactic kind of like heavy-handed sort of a professorial sort of approach to it, but it's not a dead body that needs an autopsy. It's alive, and it needs to be heard, and that body is singing a lot. And I'm probably messing up my metaphors there, but so I would just say, like, take steps. And so, modeling is probably the most important thing, is getting there. It doesn't mean you have to be like, if you're an engineer or something, and it doesn't mean you have to like suddenly turn into like Shakespeare or something. You just don't have to, but just engaging, especially little kids. Little kids have very low standards. So just reading them a story, I bet you'll be surprised by how engaged, if you even just made up a story with them tonight. They love the effort. They love the attention. They love you. So I think don't be.
I think we may have a delay. Let's see if we can get him back here. Hey, Sam, can you hear us? Let's see. Hold tight, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see if we can get him back on here without too much difficulty. And see if we can pull him back in here. But while we're waiting to see if we can get him back on the feed, make sure you go and sign up for the drawing for the signed copy of the Green Ember series. It's the original 4-book series. Each of them is autographed by SD or Sam, and you can sign up for that. And you can find the link in the comments. Just scroll up a little ways there. Another thing that I would note to those of you who are tuning in, when we talk about creativity and what it means to be creative, there's a lot of opportunity for people to think, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not that person. How can I foster that with my children? And I think of the opportunities that we have when students are in our lives. And one of the most clear examples to me is my mom was an art student, but my dad was a computer programmer. And my mom is an art student. She was the obvious creative person, and my dad was the one who I thought, oh, maybe he's not so creative. And then I realized that my dad, as a computer programmer, was solving problems every single day. That was what he did. He was creative, even to the core, but it didn't express itself in the same way as painting portraits or something like that. So even a lot of us, I think, tend to put creativity in a box that's way over there, whereas creativity is something that can kind of fill out more broadly. So Sam, it looks like you may be back in the chat, but your camera just cut out.
I'm here. If you can hear, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you so much. Thanks for troubleshooting that.
We lost power. Our power is out. So I'm on my phone now on a cellular signal. But if I'm a little iffy. We've had such windy. It's been super windy and stormy, kind of. So I'm not too surprised. But sorry about that.
Do you have any snow out there?
We had a little bit, but it's mostly just been rain.
Okay. Wow. So I guess we kind of lost you as you were wrapping up a thought on parents encouraging their kids to step in and pick up the pen and engage some creative pursuit. So I would like to give you a chance to finish that, but I would also like to ask the audience if you guys have any questions that you would like us to address. So if you have any questions for Sam or for me, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll come back to those in a second. But Sam, would you mind filling out that thought?
Sure. I mean, I could go on and on about this idea, and I think there's so much. And I would say, don't lose heart. Like as parents, there's so much you can do, and so many of the other things that you're doing, like we're all trying to, power came back on. There, so many things you're trying to do already. Like you're basically, at the beginning, you teach kids how to brush your teeth and eat your food and have good manners and all those kind of things. And you think about those as being like sort of divorced. And then there's this artistic category where people are weird and they need to like just sit around, lay around and lament and feel moody and have bad attitudes, or like we have this sort of idea of an artist as being apart. And I would just say like that's really a lot of nonsense. And a lot of things that help you in other areas of life, like habits, like good habits. So when you are helping your creative kid, when you are holding them accountable to like take out the trash and to have and to like read your Bible and pray and to brush your teeth and to clean your room, like all those things are really, really valuable when you teach them home and economy sort of habits. It's so powerful. Robert Dryden said, we first make our habits and then our habits make us. And I think that's so important. You are what you continually do, Aristotle said. Excellence, therefore, is a habit. And these things that have the power of habits is so profound. So everything you can do to help them foster good spiritual, home, economic, creative habits, all these things are such, they're secret keys, because there's a lot of like creative kids out there. A lot of people who are like have a flair, have a creative side, can write, can do these kind of things. But what kills them is they don't know how to do a budget. They don't know how to like run a business. So I mean, I know so many artists who are like no idea how
the
to
starving artist stereotype is a thing.
Exactly. It's such a stereotype. And it's like, and allowed to have bad manners, allowed to have bad mental health. That's, exercise, move, get going, like do these things that like that every other person needs to do as well. And those are really powerful for the creative person. And sort of like for that creative person, like see yourself as part of the body of Christ. If you're in a community, if you're in part of a family, you're not separate or different. Like you have a different gift. You are equipped in a unique way to help other people. And so you are like the hand. Don't say to the eye, I don't need you. We all need each other. Bring your gifts into the community. Don't see yourself as someone who is set apart from everybody else. See yourself as someone who's involved and someone who belongs in a community, and figure out ways to integrate yourself. And if you do have problems, if you're introverted and you struggle a little bit with like depression or those kinds of things, like that's okay. That's a struggle, and acknowledge that, but don't live there. You don't have to live there. Don't sort of buy the whole like brooding artist. Like if that really is a struggle, which it might be, then address it and try to take care of yourself and try to, get the right help you need and belong in a community. Don't isolate yourself and make things worse. See yourself as someone who's a servant to a community of people, and someone who belongs and has a call from God to use their gifts to serve other people. So integration, not isolation, and good habits.
Well, we have a good number of questions from the audience. So I would like to remind the audience that please avoid any spoilers in your questions. So I'm gonna pick a few of those questions that have come in. And Eva asked if your kids like writing too. I know your son's writing a book with you, Jack Zulu, but what about kind of the wider family culture?
Yeah, most of the kids do. I would say almost all of them are pretty much enjoy it. Just Josiah and Ann, the oldest two, are probably the furthest along in that. They're both write music, and Ann's a really wonderful writer, an excellent writer. So yeah, most of the kids do enjoy it. I have one kid that's a little more of like the athletic kind, which is also sort of true. That's part of me too. Like he's a big soccer player and he loves stories as well, but it's just that he's a little less focused on sort of the writing side of things than the other kids.
Well, I felt like the athletic side came through in your descriptions of Heather and Pickett running through the field. Like I felt like it was vivid and alive, and it it kind of showed a real sense of somebody who knows what it's like to run. Okay, so another question: how do you get through writer's block? Does that happen? Do you have writer's block? And if so, how do you face that
I do
big
not
monster?
participate. I do not participate in writer's block. There is a part of me. There's a better answer. Brett Harris from the Young Writers Workshop is more gracious than I am. His answer is, it's kind of like when you have a chore and you have all the dishes to do, and your mom or dad say, "Hey, you got to do the dishes," and you're like, "Oh man, I don't want to do the dishes," and you kind of imagine this whole big job. His advice is like, go do one dish. Go do one dish. And then like you go do one dish and you're kind of like, okay, this isn't that bad. And you kind of get in the flow a little bit. So I think his advice is, hey, go write a sentence. You don't have to do anything else. Just write a sentence. Just write a paragraph. Just kind of take it in small bites. I think that's good advice. The other side, the more sort of like hardcore side for you tough people out there, is to say, you're not allowed to be blocked. Nobody else in a profession gets to wake up and say, hey, I've got teachers blocked today. I've got surgeons blocked today. I've got plumbers blocked today. Nobody else gets that. Why do we get it? Show up and do your work. Write bad. Writing bad's fine for a while. It's better than just sitting there and giving yourself permission to not engage. The easiest thing in the world is to not write. That's so simple. Everybody does it.
I think it's G.K. Chesterton who says anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. And it's better to start and do it and get better than to never start because you feel some sort of paralyzing effect.
Don't indulge. And that's part of the whole thing. Like, show up with an apron. Don't show up with a beret and a cheroot and I'm an elite kind of thing. And when the muse strikes, I'll show up. Think of yourself as a servant. Think of the person that you're working for, the audience. What are you trying to give them? And can you give it to them? And so think about it in those terms. Don't think about it in this sort of like elite kind of a way. And that'll help. You got to show up. You're like a plumber, man. You got to be there. You don't get a block. You don't get show up and do the work. And
I'm picturing an avant-garde French intellectual on one side, and I'm picturing a troubadour or somebody who's there to tell a story, and the king is leaning forward, expecting it to happen.
It's time.
Anyway, what's like maybe 2 or 3 practical steps for a young writer to kind of say, okay, I am going to not participate in writer's block. I am going to sit down and I'm going to start a story.
Well, write bad. So don't sweat it. If you're just beginning and you're really young and you're just go, man. Don't sweat it. Just tell a story. Do a really bad one. It's not the one everyone's going to see. It's not the thing you're going to be known for. Everybody, when they're 13 years old or 12 years old or 10 years old, everybody thinks this is the thing. This is my Little Women, or this is my Anne of Green Gables. It's probably not. So don't feel that in a bad way. Get the enthusiasm and feel the enthusiasm for your story and just go, man. Just enjoy it. Write it for somebody else. Write it for your sister, your grandma. Do something modest to begin with. You don't have to be C.S. Lewis right out the gate. You're fine. You're going to be who you are. And that's why my Green Writer course, I talk about going and growing. You have a green light. You can go. You don't have to wait for the muse to strike. You don't have to wait till things are perfect. You don't have to wait till you have enough information. Guess what? If you do that, you will never go. So you have a green light now. Go. But you're also green, like a green living thing. You're growing. You're becoming something that you aren't yet. So you're becoming someone who can write excellent stories that are generous. But you're maybe not there yet. But give yourself a chance. You're just a little green shoot, man. You're going to grow. You're going to grow. You're going to get better. But you don't get better by being inactive, and you don't get better by being paralyzed. Do it imperfectly. Do it scared. Do it stupid. Do it less informed than you are going to be. You got to go. You got to go now. And so I would say just get started and do something really modest. Don't try to write a 17-volume fantasy novel with 50 different worlds and 30 different languages. So you can spend a lot of time researching, translation, not writing. And write a small story. Write a small short story that's 100 words or 1,000 words, something really attainable, and write the end. Try to write a decent beginning. Try to write a middle. Try to write an end. then write the end, and then start another one. You'll learn so much by doing that. Be modest, have a small expectations, do bite-sized kind of things. A lot of all those things, like the whole researching a big, huge fantasy series, that's easy because you're never going to release that. That's not, that's so easy, but it's hard. It's brave to write something and write the end and share it with somebody. So think modestly, think small, and you'll get better. Write bad. Give yourself to permission, like Chesterton said, to be bad for a while. That's okay. Get comfortable with that. Everybody that you admire and love as a writer wrote bad stuff. Everybody. Michael Jordan was a bad basketball player at one point. It's very few in any field came out the womb, ready to play a symphony. Like, you do have these sort of rare prodigies sometimes. You're probably not that. You're probably somebody like everybody else who has to work at it and who will get better if you do. So don't take the shortcut, take the long cut, be modest, go after it. You're green, you're going, and you're growing. And keep those things in mind, and that's a good way to start.
So you have that the green writer. You're talking about somebody who's green, just starting out,
Yeah.
And but it also ties into the Green Ember. So there is another question: how do you overcome the perfectionist and know when to finish your story?
Great question. I mean, it depends on when you are. If this is like your 7th novel and you're 37 years old, and that's a different answer than if you're trying to finish a story and you're 12 years old. If you're 12 years old, do the best you can and stop sweating it. Stop worrying about it. Go to the next thing. Do not be paralyzed by that perfectionism. It will never be perfect. So you cannot let that, control you and command your life. You cannot do that. You've got to finish. You can go back, like you get permission to sort of rewrite at some point, but really, let's keep going. Let's keep going and getting better and growing. So overcoming it, I don't know exactly how you do it. At some point, you're going to be having other people speak into it. And those need to be coaches, not just like accusers. You can't empower people to who are sort of not on the same team. You need people that are ready to criticize at times, like a good coach, someone who we're both in the game together, trying to win, and you're trying to play, and they're trying to bring the best out of you. That's what you want. You want to empower those people. You need more and more people telling you sort of where you're wrong as you get more and more mature on the journey, and trusted editors, that kind of thing. But to begin with, man, just lower the stakes for yourself. Raise the stakes in your story, but lower the stakes for yourself. Take some of the pretension out of it. A lot of us, we just want to be famous and wealthy, and we want to have written a book, and we want to have like the popularity of having a book printed. Like, relax a little bit. You don't need that right away. Try to focus on loving the audience. Try to focus on giving a gift. And that changes your orientation a little bit, because it gives you permission to get better, permission to be imperfect, those kinds of things as you grow. It's the long cut. It's not a shortcut to glory. It's sort of the long cut to generosity. And I think that's more important. And I think that will empower you. It's a lot of identity stuff. If you know who you are in Christ, if you know who you are, who you belong to, and what your calling is, it empowers you to live out sort of generously in your vocation in a way that, if you're just like, I just want, and I'm not saying it's bad to want to publish a book, it's bad to want to sell books. I love that. It's awesome. It's cool. But if that's your whole thing, man, that's going to really not fulfill you. It's just not going to. Fame, fortune. I mean, how many times do we have to hear that it doesn't fulfill people? It just doesn't. It's not the thing. But knowing who you are as a child of God and living out that generous gift in ways that is generous to other people, that is fulfilling, and that is beautiful. So I would work for that and be patient with yourself as you go.
So as we're coming up on the end here, I'm hearing you, and what keeps coming to mind is the picture of you on your front steps telling a story about rabbits. Telling the story to your kids. You're not trying to create a vast world. It becomes. You're not trying to change the world. You're trying to change the wide world. You are trying to change the world of your children.
Yep.
And that, I think, is a key thing to remember. A lot of people chase fame. A lot of people chase money. A lot of people chase, the followers on social media. But what can you do to change the world that's right in front of you? How can we mend what's broken right there? So as we come to the end, thank you very much, Sam, for joining us. We are doing a giveaway of Sam's Green Ember Series. These hardback copies are available for the giveaway, thanks to Sam and his team. If you're interested, enter the drawing, sign up at the link posted in the comments, and remember, the submissions will close as soon as the session ends. We will also be posting a link to Sam's writing course, the Green Writer, in the comments, so anybody can check that out as well. Parents, if you want to know more about how to engage the creativity, feel free to check out Sam's website and get more information there. And also remember, HSLDA wants to give your homeschool child a chance to shine and pursue their creative skills. You may not be aware, but HSLDA does hold a yearly contest in poetry. We also have a contest in video and photo, short story, and art and essay. So we have several ways that young people can express that creativity. And we'll put a link in the comments for more details on our contests. But make sure you sign up for our email list to get notified about the 2023 contest dates. Also, if you're not a member of HSLDA yet, we would love to have you join us at HSLDA. Just go to the website and click join. Sam, thanks again for joining us. Thank you for being a part of seeing the world for what it is and seeing that we can be a part of mending by using the creative gifts that we have in the world that's right in front of us. Thank you for telling the stories to your kids, and thank you for sharing those stories with so many of us across the homeschool spectrum as we experience the life that comes from beautiful storytelling.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me today. Sorry about the power outage, but thanks for bearing with me. It was great to be with y'all today.
Oh, it was great to have you. Thanks for bearing with us and jumping back on when everything went dark. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.